Hey, welcome to the postponed live stream on how to arrange Trouble in Mind. So, I've never bought into that musician thing about not being able to function early in the morning. And every time you hear like some interview with a musician on the radio, they're always like, oh, it's too early in the morning for me to play. It's too early for me to sing. And I'm like, nah, I'm a morning person. But I am feeling it this morning. I don't know. Not having the laser sharp focus I like to bring. But anyway, here we are, and we're going to talk about how to arrange. We're going to look at some vamps and some shout chorus ideas for this 8-bar blues in A. And if you're watching on the live stream, hope this is helpful as well. But if you're here live, put your questions in the chat as we go along. If anything's not clear or there's something you want me to expand on. And I've got actually a couple of things people already posted in the forum about addressing today, in addition to the stuff that I've planned. So I'll be getting to that as well. I need more coffee. Okay, maybe that's the ticket. Okay. Good advice. Always good advice. So let's get to it. If you go to the intro and PDF page for this month, you can get the updated version 1.2 that has the arranging stuff. And also I corrected a bunch of typos. And big shout out to Ricky for doing some proofing, and also to Tim K, who did some proofing. They both offered, and I was like, that'd be great. So hopefully all the typos have been caught at this point, thanks to their hard work, and I appreciate that immensely. So I'm going to pull up the notation and tab, and we'll get into it. Oh wait, hang on. One thing I got to do first. Got to make sure I can still see the chat stream. And there we go. Now I can see you guys, all of y'all. And then this goes over here. And let's go like that. And where's the beginning of... There we go. Okay. And there we go. Okay, so the 7-step arc. This is the 7-step outline for arranging any of these tunes. It's pretty flexible, but we always start here with these 7 steps. So if you're new and haven't seen me go through this, here's the idea. You've been working on the fundamental, which is step 2, and maybe the embellished, which is step 3. And then last week we talked about, or a week and a half ago, we talked about improvisation. So there's step 4. And we even did an intro. We did a vamp back at the beginning of the month as well. So the idea is you start with your intro. This is one of the intros that we had, one of the vamps it's the vamp that we did at the beginning of the month. And then from that, you can go into the fundamental version. And since from there, you can go into the embellished version. So the fundamental version is meant to be a less syncopated, more straightforward way to get your hands around the melody and the bass of the tune. And then the embellished version gives you, a little more color, more depth in terms of the chord voicings. Maybe some bass lines or things are different. But you can also use them. As a kind of development to go from the simpler version of the fundamental, and then the second time through the melody, move on to the embellished version. It feels like a development. It feels like you've taken it to the next step. And from there, you could go into an improvisation. So as you can see, the work we've done so far this month, we've already done these 4 steps really, and then this step here, the vamp, and then even the embellished. So with what we've done so far, we've really got most of what's going on in the tune and enough to make a full 2 to 3 minute arrangement. But this here, the shout chorus, is a new idea. And The shout chorus is somewhere in between the melody and an improvisation. It's worked out ahead of time, so it's not improvised, but it's not the melody. It's often more chord-based, more riff-based, and the term itself comes from swing and jazz music from the 1930s and 40s. The shout chorus is a moment in a big band arrangement, or a small group arrangement even, where everybody sort of gets together near the end of the tune and plays something worked out. And it gets its name from the fact that it sounds like everybody's shouting at once. If you've got a big band with trumpets and trombones and saxophones, and suddenly all 12 or 13 of those people start playing the same thing together, it feels big and loud and climactic. So that's where that name comes from. But we can use it as an idea on the guitar as well, and I'm going to show you a few different ways to do it. Now, you could also have vamps in between, like in the example I just played on the way into this lesson. I think I stuck a vamp in between, maybe even like the first two passes of the melody. I maybe did a vamp before the solo. The vamp is just any place you want to kind of kill time and, pull back, set things up for what's going to come next. So, but we're going to walk through a few different vamps, and we'll go through, and I'll talk more about what that's about and why we're doing it. So let's get to it. Here are some ideas about vamps and intros. For starters, the vamp exists outside of the main tune, or outside of the basic chord progression. So there's a certain amount of freedom to mess around with what's going on, right? When you're playing through the tune, you really want to be mindful of what are the original chords of the tune, what is the original melody of the tune, how you phrase it, how you voice those chords is flexible, but you're kind of bound by the structure of the tune. But a vamp exists outside of that. It's going to come in between verses, or it's going to come at the beginning or the end of the tune. And so it's kind of a bit more of a playground where you can make up stuff and do things that you want to do. So the two simplest things you can do in terms of the chords is you can rock between two chords, or you can have a short cyclical progression. So the vamp that I gave you at the beginning of the month was the first kind. It goes between A and E. So, and you can do that for as long or as short as you want. Right? It's the vamp is flexible in that it can expand or contract to suit your needs. Now, alternatively, you could have a short cyclical progression, meaning maybe 3 or 4 chords that go around in a loop. And so the vamp that I opened with today does that. So we're going from A to C7 to B7 to B flat 7. And I'm going to unpack like what's going on there and how to play it in a minute. But that's an example of, in this case, we're rocking between 1 and 5. In this case, we're really doing variations on a turnaround, a 1, 6, 2, 5 turnaround. So it's a little bit, it sort of travels a little further. Now, in terms of what the bass, in terms of what the bass, come back. How did this happen? There we go. In terms of what the bass is doing, you have a couple of choices. One is to have what's called a pedal point, which means you just pick one bass note and stay on it. And we're going to look at an example of that where we pedal on the low E. Or you can have it move with the chord progression like this does. You could, I suppose, sounds a little, goes outside a little bit, but you could do that. You could have, just pedaling, staying on that one bass note. The term pedal point is a classical music term. It comes from organ players, church organ players who would have pedals to play with for the bass notes. And there might be a moment in like a fugue or a, something else where the bass, they would just be holding down one bass note and doing all this different kind of stuff on top of it. And so pedal point, like you're holding down a pedal. That's where that comes from. So in terms of the voicings you can choose, we've looked at the chord progression, we've looked at the bass. two different ideas in terms of what you can do with voicings. Common tone means keeping something in common on top. So if you're on an A chord, well, let's see, let's pick something that's actually going to work. So if you're on an A chord and you grab this E note as your top note, and then you go to the 5 chord, you keep that E right there. Or you could grab the 7th, and then you go to the E7 and you keep that note and you use it to play an E7 sharp 9. So common tone meaning this note is held in common by both voicings. So right. Or if we're up here, again, just picking a note and hanging on for dear life, leaving it on top. And you can kind of experiment around to see what works and use your ear. But I'm going to show you some specific examples, of course. And then guide tone, in contrast, it means if you want to have the sound of the top note of your chord sort of moving in a specific direction. So if you're doing the same vamp of just 1 to 5 to 1 to 5, now instead of having a common tone on top, right, like the 7th maybe, like from A to E to A, now we've got something moving up on top. So as you hear the rock between the two chords, you're also hearing a little melody climbing up on top. And it can be going down too. But it's the idea that your ear has something to hold on to, something moving in a particular direction. And that's moving by scale steps, but you could have chromatic ones as well. And there's better, more tasteful ones than that, but that's one example. And then finally, the groove can be either a quarter note pulse, right? Like this, just like the steady bass we've got in the tune. And in the case of the first vamp, the chords are syncopated, right? They're coming on and off the beat, but the bass is very steady, just doing quarter notes. But an ostinato, another classical music term, an ostinato means a short, repeated rhythm. More like that, for instance. So you could have that in conjunction with a bass line that's moving around. So, and that's implying certain chords, but the point is that it's syncopated. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and I guess you're landing on these strong beats anyway, so it's not that syncopated. 1, but those in between notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So when you're hitting those notes that are on the and, it gives it kind of a syncopated feel. And you can start to put stuff on top of that, which is what we're going to do in just a minute. So that's just, if you want to be able to make these things on your own, this is kind of a way you can break down what some of the possibilities are. And you can also, as we go through the vamps I'm going to show you, you can be sort of keeping these different ideas in mind. So let's look at a few vamps. So here's the first one that we had at the beginning of the month. first week, I broke down how to play this, so I won't go into detail about it again. But there are these two voicings, and so we've got we're going between two chords, so rocking between two chords, and just being mindful of what's on top. It does create kind of a little melody on top. And one of the ways to come up with vamps is to think in terms of blues licks, right? That's all this is. It's just voiced with chords underneath so that it sounds thicker than just. And I'm not worrying about anything except the main chord. I'm not trying to harmonize the whole thing. Right, that would start to sound kind of lumpy. So it's just grabbing those chords on the downbeat, using an open string, again grabbing a chord. So trying to keep it musical and light on its feet, but still doing what it needs to do. Okay, next, these are some new vamps. So there's 3 more of these. And so you can pick one vamp and use it as a recurring theme, or you can say, well, I'm going to use this theme, this particular vamp for the intro and the ending, but then I'm going to use a different vamp when I'm in the middle of the song. The idea is just to have some options that you can mess around with. So here we have, this is the one that I opened with a variation on this, but. And so this is the cyclical thing that I mentioned. So it's 4 chords going from A to C7 to B7 to B flat, and I'm just keeping the bass in quarter notes. And then doing a couple of rhythmic things and using an open string when I can. And then the second time, changing the rhythm a little bit and using the open B string. Now, if you're, theory-minded, we are doing, I mentioned that this was basically a variation on a 1-6-2-5. The idea is you're in the key of A, and working backwards, E7 is the 5 chord. And when you play from 5 to 1, that takes you back to the 1 chord. But you can say, well, what is the 5 of this chord? We're on an E chord. What is its 5 chord? If we were in the key of E, what would the 5 chord be? What would be the chord that sets up E? And so the 5 of E is B7. So we can have B7, E7, A. And then you can take it one step further and go, what is the 5 of B? If B was the 1 chord, what would its 5 chord be? And it's F sharp. So that means you can go, starting on A, you can leap to F sharp, which does not belong in the key at all, but takes you to B7. B7 also does not belong in the key, but it takes you to E. E is in the key of A, and it takes you back to A. So you can have this, which is called a 1, 6, 2, 5, 1 chord progression. And then we can take this F sharp and we can say, well, F sharp, here's the 3rd and the flat 7 of F sharp. If we move the bass over to here, to C7, we still have these 2 important notes. So we can substitute in C7 for F sharp. And it will still take us to B. And then we can look at the E chord. We can say, oh, well, if we put the bass here on B flat, it'll still take us down to A. And that's how you get this kind of chromatic motion. And anytime you take a 7th chord, dominant 7th chord, and you swap it out for a chord whose bass is an interval of a tritone away, that's called a tritone substitution. And so we have C substituting for F sharp, which leads you to B7, which leads you to B flat substituting for E. So it gives you this nice chromatic descent. And it sounds good, but it's based on something real that you're allowed to do. So that's how that one goes. And then here we have, it's sort of a pedal point, but not purely, because it starts on E. So really, it's just starting from the 5 chord. I shouldn't really call it a pedal point, because even though it does sit on E for a while, it does resolve back to A. But the idea here is you would probably come in on bar 7 of the melody, you know, like no, I mean, I keep thinking that you would, but no, you'd come in right at the end. So whether it's the melody or it's the improvisation. Right, so it gives you a different kind of feel. There's sort of this feeling of time being suspended the way you're sitting on this E chord. And in terms of the technique, your thumb's got the bass, your index is going to be over on the 4th string, and then middle and ring are going to grab the 3rd and 2nd string. And the rings are going to also grab the open high string. And then these licks, could be anything. You know, those are ones that I like, but they're just blues licks. So whatever's going on over here and over here, over time, as you get comfortable with this idea, you can swap in different stuff. And finally, I mentioned this idea of a syncopated bass line, an ostinato. So there's the bass line. You can see that there. So that's basically implying A7, right? There's the 7th of A. This is implying a D chord with the 3rd in the bass. And then this is implying either an F7 to E or a D minor to E, however you want to think about it. So then, of course, like, what can you put on top of that? Right? So you would, you know, this you could start the tune with. The main trick with this, I have learned the hard way, is not to start too fast, because if the tempo of the tune is, then this bass line needs to be pretty slow. And then the idea is to put these little licks on top, like here and here. It sounds like this. So all together. See, and I sped up, so like that's too fast, really. So probably might be good to put this in the middle of the tune where you've already kind of established the tempo. This is the one I was thinking of, where you should really start on bar 7, right? Instead of doing the turnaround. So. So makes a nice little spot like that. Okay, so we're going to get to the shout chorus next, but I see a bunch of questions, so I'm going to try to answer those. Let me just change it up here so you can see the guitar better, and let's get to some of these. Okay, let's see. Where do the questions start? Nice to see everybody here. Let's see. Okay. Here's one. So from, also I have no idea what time it is because I didn't put my clock up. So give me 1 second just to make sure I'm being smart with the time. Oh God, it's already 11:08 here. Okay. Well, that's the way it goes. Okay. So from Mike, do you feel like a vamp is sufficient to connect a bridge in a song to the outro and the ending? I mean, if you're talking about more of like a song structure, like not a blues, but like, you know, with a verse, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, out kind of thing. The vamp, to me, kind of does function at times as the outro. So I sort of think of it that way, as like the vamp is this flex. It's like once I've sort of figured out what the vamps are going to be, I think of those as either that single vamp or that pair or a group of vamps as being, that's what's going to work as the intro, any kind of middle section that I need, and an outro. So you just have to kind of see how that vamp functions with the outro you've got in mind. But I think to me, these particular set of amps would sound redundant played back to back because they're doing the same kind of job. So I hope that helps. From Johnny, fooling around with the tune, I found myself improvising for a few bars on the vamp itself before turning back to the progression. Cool or not? Totally cool. Yeah, I mean, I know there's other tunes that we've done where the vamp's been presented as kind of an opportunity to improvise. Maybe on some of the earlier tunes before I was actually writing out all the vamps. Yeah, I mean, if you've got this one, it's got a lick built into it, and so yeah, I mean, once you're into this structure, I'm going to put some signposts every 4 bars, like the top of the 4-bar cycle and the end of the 4-bar cycle. And then, once you set up, I mean, again, it's all about sort of creating a context. So if you play the vamp once, that's almost like playing the melody of the tune and setting it up for an improvisation. So once you've done that, you can then just take that bass, that's your foundation. Right, and all I'm doing is just using that opening chord as a signpost. So that's setting up like a little structure. So it's the same idea as we've done like for the tune, only like really tiny, like, oh, use this vamp as a thing to set it up, then find your spots to improvise, create a little bit of context with the chords, and you're good to go. It's a great idea, Johnny. Okay. Let's see. Okay, from Frank. I have a question, but I don't think I could articulate it in words on here. It's about the chords. C7 flat 7, for example. Okay, well, I'm not sure if you clarify that further down the road, but if you want to, I'll be trying to answer whatever the question is. From Adam. Hey, David, I don't comprehend how some of these chords aren't in the key of A, but are still scale intervals of A. How does this work out? Happy to talk about that. Let's see. Mike, here's the follow-up. Great. Perfect. The vamp is actually part of an outro. There are some arguments in songwriter circles about bridge function. Thanks. Okay, if that's clear, we can always talk about that more. Gary, will this video be available later? Yes. All the live streams get archived. You can already find them. It already has its own page. If you go to this month's lessons and you look down below the fundamental, the embellished, the vamp, you'll see the 3 live streams from this month. And there should already be, I think I already put in a link to the YouTube that you're watching. And so you should be able to go just to the Trouble in Mind page and go to the bottom, see the 3 live streams. Or click on the entry for Trouble in Mind live streams and then find a page with the 3 of them. I can't remember quite how I did it. But yes, you can watch this forever and ever, amen, as long as you're subscribed. Okay, I want to answer this question about the chords from Adam. Then I'll get into the shout chorus, and then I'll get into the questions. Particularly, Bruce Burns had a question. He's been asking me this for 3 weeks, and I keep saying I'm going to talk about it once I've figured it out. How to modulate between doing Trouble in Mind in the key of A and Trouble in Mind in the key of E. Because if you go into the core content, I believe, under the core content lessons on the horizontal 3-step, there is notation and tab for playing Trouble in Mind in the key of E. So if you want to be able to play the version in 2 different keys and switch between them, which is kind of a cool idea, I'm going to show you a couple ways to modulate between the 2, which modulate is just a fancy word. It means change key. So real quick, this question from Adam. Okay, why do these chords, why can we play them in A even though they're not in the key? And why do they work even though the root is a scale note of A? So here's the deal. You're not supposed to. Diatonic chords means the chords that are in a key, which means chords built only out of notes in the scale of the home key. So there is no A sharp in the key of A, right? But you need an A sharp to form an F sharp 7 chord. So F sharp and B7 are both called borrowed chords. They're borrowed from another key. And the justification for them being here in the key of A is that E7 belongs in the key of A. It's built only out of notes that exist in the A major scale. But B7, if you were in the key of E, which you're not, but if you were, then B7 would be the 5 chord in the key of E, and B7 is made out of notes that belong in the key of E. But this sound, B7 to E, is a strong resolution. And so to get to the E chord in a persuasive way, we're going to borrow B7. And so we get this sound of 5 to 1 going from B7 to E. And then we do the same thing with F sharp. We say, well, what is the 5 chord in the key of B? I know we're not in the key of B, but what if we were? And you can, in the key of B, the 5 chord is F7. And so that's a persuasive move to go from F sharp 7 to B7. And so all these chords are justified backwards. Basically, by working backwards, you say, oh, well, F sharp does not belong, but it's the 5 of B7. B7 doesn't belong, but it's the 5 of E. E7 does belong because it's the 5 of A. So, the F sharp shows up and it's a surprising sound. Surprise is nice and good a lot of times in music. But it's justified by the job that it does, taking you all the way back. So that's the explanation. Those chords are not in the key, they are borrowed. And they're borrowed by a sort of chain of inferences. Everything that's there is a 5 of something until we get to the place where we're actually back in the key again. So hopefully that makes sense. I know I've explained tritone substitutions elsewhere. I know there's a video on the YouTube channel about tritone substitutions. And so if you want more clarification, I know I talked about it there, and I probably talked about it in some live streams as well. I might have even talked about it in the chord substitutions workshop in July inside the membership, and you can look for that as well for more details. So let's move on and get into the shout chorus. Now again, the shout chorus is just designed to be a moment in the tune. You've played the intro, you've played a couple passes through the melody, you've taken a solo, and now you want to really like reach the crescendo of whatever it is you're doing. And so the shout chorus is a worked out idea, usually very, based on some kind of it's more important rhythmically and harmonically than it is melodically, probably. Like it's more about the chords and the rhythm of what you're doing than having a cool melody. So in this case, here's one. And what the way that it's often used is someone is like in a band, what would happen is there'd be a soloist, maybe a second soloist, and then there'd be the shout chorus. But the shout chorus is kind of a way of punctuating more soloing. So you sometimes have a shout chorus for part of a cycle, and then you hear the improviser take over again. And so we're going to play shout chorus for the first 4 bars of the tune, and then go back to improvising. So in this case, we're doing it with 7th chords like this. Make sure I got the right voicings here. So played in context, you'd be coming around from... Oh, it stays up. This one stays up here. So... do it again and then do a different solo. Right, so it's a way of building the energy, and you can bring it down a little bit after that for the back half, for the soloing. Bring it up again for the second time through. You can do the shout chorus more than once, especially on an 8-bar tune like this. It's really effective. And then you feel this, so you feel this contrast between the composed part, the part you've worked out, and then the improvised part that comes afterwards. And it's a way of creating some shape for your soloing, and you only have to take a 4-bar solo, basically, because the shout chorus takes up half of the chorus. So it gives you, like, you know, some guidelines, some guideposts to kind of work your way through. And so the voicings I'm using are just, I'm using A7 here with the 5th and the flat 7 and the 3rd. And then I'm going to E9, it's one of my favorite voicings. It's got the 9th and the 3rd and the flat 7. And then up to A7. And if you go through those dominant dozen worksheets, you can see, these are coming right out of those 3-note voicings on the top 3 strings. And the dominant dozen stuff is in the core content as well. So we're just going between, and this is kind of a guide tone line too, right? The melody's not a primary concern, but it's nice to have the melody do something, to have the top note imply some kind of direction. And then here we're coming down some sort of fancy D chords. I'm keeping the A in the bass because it's nice and full. We could. There was a question about this. Why not go over the D on the 4th string? And you can. It just doesn't have as much weight, as these other 2 bass strings. So you can, A is the 5th of a D chord, so you can keep that in the bass. And so here we've got the 3rd, the 5th, and the 9th. So that's a D9 or a D add 9 because there's no 7th in the chord. And then here we're going to, here's same thing as the E chord, only down a whole step. Here's the 9th and the 3rd and the 7th. And then D6. I didn't mark these all out in the tab, but that's what they are. And there's D9. So that's a way of getting again, it's like a harmonized blues lick. And as far as the technique, on these triplets, you can either, be a little more clean and articulate and use index, middle, and ring to pull up on all 3 strings like that. Or you can be more old school and go for like that sort of more delta vibe, just brush up with the index finger. So. I think for these, I'd want to grab for these, want to make them more articulate. But I kind of like the idea of using that, I hate to use the word primitive because it sounds pejorative, but it's rawer to do that brushing thing. And so to do that in conjunction with these kind of slicker 9th chords and stuff that you don't really hear on Delta Blues records is kind of a cool and funny idea to me. And then you're just improvising. So that's 1-shot chorus. Here's another variation on that idea. Using those 6th and 9th chords all the way through. So here's A6, 6th and root and 3rd. Oh, I just realized I have not been paying attention to the chat. Let me make sure that's still visible. Okay. Yeah, so, whoops. Back to this, sorry. Okay, so A6, and then it's again the same triplet feel, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then to the E9, and then A6, so what happens is we take this A6 chord, 6 and root and 3, and go down chromatically to here where it becomes an A9. Here's the 5th and the 7 and the 9. What's the rhythm here? That's right. So I'm using the open E string on the and of 2. And now again, here's A6 again with the 3rd and the 6th and the root. Going down to A9 again. Here's the 9 and the 5th and the flat 7. So, and now we're on D and just putting in a blues lick here. So it's like a combination of chord things and blues lick things. So again, the whole thing sounds like this. And again, you know, what's the melody doing? here it's more of a chromatic thing, meaning moving by half step. So we have from here we go up, but then we come back down, and then we hear. So the fact that you're moving chromatically is kind of a thematic thread for this one. And these chords are a little hard to switch between, but if you use your ring finger as the anchor, then really just the index and the middle finger are just switching places and staying at the same frets. And the thumb's going down to the bass. So that's the second shout chorus. It's similar to the first one in vibe. And then here we have something a little more modern because it uses these suspensions. So it takes this A7 chord and suspends it by turning like a sus4, like Pinball Wizard, going from, even though that's, I don't think quite the right voicing. But anyway, the idea of taking the third and suspending it by changing it to the fourth and then moving it back. So here we have A7, and the third becomes the fourth, and becomes the third again. So, and on the E7 we do the same thing. This would be E7 with the third and the seventh, but we change the third to the fourth, and then back to A, and then for D again we keep the A in the bass. So it's a much more modern color for this very traditional blues, which again, might be something you want to do. I like that kind of thing, sort of coming into play, but some people want to keep it much more traditional sounding. So here's what it would sound like in context. So it's not a shout chorus in the sense that it's not big and loud, right? But it's it's kind of like an inverted shout chorus in a way. It's like more introspective and quiet, right? So if you want to also if you want like the graduate degree version, you can put in these harmonics that I stole from watching Monty Montgomery play. I don't know if you haven't seen him. He's like one of these like turbocharged acoustic guitar players, right? Great player and singer and songwriter and the whole shebang. But you can do this kind of thing. Let's see. What I guess do you want? Yeah. So. Right. So you're just grabbing a harmonic at the end. Over here on the 5th fret of the high string, and then grabbing the 7th fret on the high string there. It takes a bit of doing to get that touch where you're holding down just hard enough for a harmonic. Kind of a ridiculous stretch, and you can flip them around and try different things, but I like it because it also reminds me of some of that John Renbourn stuff on the Black Balloon, where he sort of pops those harmonics into the other things that he's doing. So I've always liked that sound, and when I saw Monty Montgomery do it and got him to explain it, it was like, oh, I'm going to use that somewhere. So again, it kind of takes that spacey, introspective way of playing a blues, like kind of over the top, and it's a fun thing to do. So those are the shout courses and how to implement them. I know that we are running a little late here. I started a little late though. I don't mind going a little longer. If you got to go and watch the rest on replay, that's totally fine. But I had these questions that I got asked, and there are still some questions in the chat. So I want to get to those, and I'll probably run a little longer. I'm just gonna. I don't even know exactly what time it is because I usually put this big loud clock on my phone and leave it out in front. But I'm clearly a bit of a headless chicken today, so I didn't remember to do that. But it's just 11:30 now, my time. So stick around if you want, and I'll go over these other things. And if you got to split and watch it later, that's fine too. Okay. So the questions that I had, one was from Bruce about how to modulate between versions in E and A. I promised in the forum to explain a technique for learning and remembering chords because Heng Shor had written about in the forum about like, well, I'm getting really tense, my hands are getting really uptight working on chords, and I said I would explain this thing that I've demonstrated before, but I can't remember where, so I'll do it again. And then Ricky had a question about how to end the song, some endings. So I'll talk about that. And try to get through all that. So let's look at modulating. So if you play in the key of E, you get to play more in open position, which is cool in some ways. But I did it in A this month because I know lots of people are always looking for ways to get out of open position and get up the neck. So that was kind of the motivation for doing it in A. So if you learn both versions, like I said, the tab is over in the core content. Then Bruce was like, well, how do you modulate between those two? And I made a complete hash of it trying to demonstrate it on the fly the other day. So I actually sat down, worked out some modulations, and now I'm going to just sort of explain them. So when you're going from A to E, let's say you got around to the ending. And let's say you did the turnaround. You could go basically from A to B7, and then you'd be in the key of E, right? And again, this is that borrowed thing. You can always use a 5 chord to get you where you want to go. So if you're in A and you want to get to E, a big fat B7 chord, which is the 5 of E, will get you there. So that's one way to do it. So or even just play the melody in, right? So bar 7, bar 8, done. You're in the key of E. Now you can start to dress that up by saying, oh, well, if I'm going to E by playing the 5 of E, what else can I do to set that up? How can I make that, cooler? And so you can say, well, what's the 2 chord in the key of E? The diatonic 2 chord. What's the chord that belongs in E on the 2? It's F sharp minor. Now, F sharp minor actually belongs in the key of A as well. It's the 6 in the key of A, and it's the 2 in the key of E. So that's actually kind of a cool thing, because it sounds like you're just going to do a turnaround in A, but oh, look, we're going to B, and now we're going to E. So I think that's what they call in classical music a pivot chord, right? Because you pivot. It's like it belongs in A and it belongs in E, but it's common to both. So you go from A to E, A to F sharp, and then the F sharp. Now we're going to B7, and we're out of here. So right, and then you're in E. And so one more step we can take. Again, we can say, well, going F sharp. What's the 5 of F sharp? It's C sharp. So right? Now those are the bones. Now you need to sort of like smooth things over, right? So you look for common tones maybe. Right? Like those three chords, A, C sharp, and F sharp all have a C sharp in them. So or you could even do a tritone substitution for B7 and go F7. So there's different ways you can try and set it up. But you could also look at what you're not worried about doing the pickup, you could say, oh, look, we got, what happens if we just keep an A on top? And so then you have this feeling of like, we're hanging on this note. And it resolves. So that's how to get from A to E. Now, what if we want to get from the key of E over to A, right? So we played. How are we going to get from E over to A? Excuse me. So E is the 5 of A. So really, it shouldn't be that hard. But the thing is, how do you make it persuasive that you're leaving the key of E and going over to the key of A? The simplest way is just to say, okay, well, we're going to take this E chord and intensify it by making it an E7 with this augmented fifth or flat 13, which kind of ups the ante of going from E because you're creating this guide tone line. It's taking you up to the A, right? So we'd have, so that's the simplest way to sit for a bar on E, and then for a bar on E augmented, which you can think of as, I mean, that chord, you know that chord, it's the Oh Darling chord. Right, and it's also the Stormy Monday chord. So it's a chord that, you know, is not that out there. But now you can start to dress this up. So we've got all this time to kill. Maybe we do something with it, like E. So E to A. Building that tension with the triplets, maybe. So again, now we've got the setup, right? We know we basically need to land on some kind of big fat E7. So how do we dress that up? Right? So now we're saying, okay, we're going to the key of A. E is the 5 in the key of A. What's the 2 in the key of A? Oh, it's B minor 7. So that's a way to do it. And then you think, oh, well, you know, let's see. In the key of E, we also have, what's the 6th chord? It's C sharp minor. We could go from C sharp minor chromatically to B minor. So that gives you some kind of motion, so you're not just sitting on E for 4 beats before you get to the B minor. So, so that's another way to do it. And then finally, like how we could use dominant chords. We can go, oh, well, B7 is the 5 of E, which is the 5 of A. So and if B is the 5 of E, what's the 5 of B? F sharp is the 5 of B, so we could have and that takes us over. So you could play it through in A. So that's not right. Oh yeah, it's got to sit longer. Okay, one more time from the top. And you're back. So, so that's Bruce's question. So I got chords and I got cool ways to end the song. And then we got some other questions in here. Yeah, Frank, I know this stuff is confusing at first. You know, the person who asked this question has been wrestling with these chord things for the better part of 2 years. So if this is going, don't worry about it. It's a cumulative process. I talk about these kinds of things, you know, the 5 of 5 of 1 and the tritone substitutions. That stuff comes up over and over again. So if you don't catch all of it this time, it will come around again. And I'm always happy to go through and explain it in a little more detail than I am. This time it's going by kind of quickly. But let's talk about grabbing these chords. So this is the chord exercise. So the question was, you know, the person who posted was like, I'm getting all this tension in my hand. I'm like gripping the guitar really hard. Is that normal? And the answer is yes. When you are trying to learn something new and really focus and really like concentrate, a lot of that effort and tension that's going on in your head gets sort of unconsciously or unintentionally translated to your hand. Like you just tend to grip the guitar really hard and that turns into like tension up here in your arm. When I was learning to play the pedal steel, I would find that I would be practicing and, you know, there's no real pressure, like the weight of the bar does all the work, but I would just be holding the bar so tightly because I was concentrating so hard and I wouldn't realize like, oh my God, I've got this death grip on this, you know, hunk of steel. So that definitely is a thing. So here is an exercise just for learning chord shapes. And this is still learning chord shapes. I remember the very first couple of weird chords I learned from like the good guitar player in my high school. And I remember him showing me like a diminished chord or something because I was trying to learn how to play I Want You, She's So Heavy, and like you needed a diminished chord. And he showed me the chord and I was just like, blah, 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 blah. And he was like, yeah, it takes a while with that one before you can just like play it. And, you know, that's the first time I had that experience, but I've had it plenty of times since with, you know, anytime I want to play a new kind of voicing. So, the thing to do, let's just take, say, this chord, right? This E9, because that's a pretty weird chord shape, right? And unfamiliar. Now you could think about it as being based on this shape, right? this A7 just moved up. But this combination of notes requires you to finger it in a way you probably wouldn't ordinarily. So you put your fingers down, which is to say you make a bar across the top 4 strings at the 9th fret with your index finger. And then your middle finger is going to go on the 10th fret here. And your ring finger is going to go on the 11th fret of the 3rd string. Now, obviously, you don't have time to think that hard in the middle of a song, right? You need to be able to go like that, just like you can probably go like that if someone wants you to play a C chord. So the goal is to be able to play this chord as effortlessly as you play a C chord, right? And that means at first you're going to be putting your fingers down one by one, right? But the thing to work on, so here's the way to practice it, to kind of reduce some of the tension. The basic metaphor is you want to be able to put all your fingers down at once in a shape, right? The same way that if I said pick up a coffee cup, I'm not sure this is on, yeah, you can see this. You know, if you go to pick up a coffee cup, you don't go like this, right? And like how I've got it, right? You know, you just go and you do it. Like your fingers know how to work as a group, and they come in and they just go where they belong and they grab the whole thing, you know? So that's what you need to be able to do with the chord, is come in and just go, there it is. But that's not going to happen automatically. You have to practice it. So you put your fingers down as slowly and meticulously as you need to get that chord. And then when you're holding that chord, you want to relax your grip so that the strings come off the fretboard. So now your fingers are just touching the strings in the right place. And you practice pressing them down so that they make the sound, and then relaxing them so that they don't. And all you're doing is just pressing and relaxing to try to get used to what those fingers feel like when they're working as a group. And when you can do that, take a break, you know, shake out your arm, like don't build up a ton of tension in your muscles. And then come back later or the next day and put your fingers down again, one by one, figure out where they go. And when you can do this, then you just lift them off like a 1/4 of an inch off the strings and see if you can press them back down in place. Now, it's not going to happen right away. You're going to lift off and you're going to come in wrong. And then you're going to have to practice like putting them back where they belong, relaxing your grip, and then lifting them a little bit off the strings and putting them down. But over the space of maybe a week or 10 days, you want to slowly or less, you know, you want to slowly lift your fingers further and further away from the fretboard until you can put them back where they belong as a group. So you go further away until you can actually take your fingers all the way out like this and bring them back in and do the chord. Right? But it starts with just relaxing the grip and pressing it down, and then slowly, so that eventually you can come from anywhere and just bring them in. But it's a practiced thing. It will not happen probably automatically. You'll have to just slowly work on it by doing this lifting and dropping thing. Okay? So that's the exercise for that. Finally, cool ways to end the song. Okay. So let's say, I mean, there are a few different ways you can do it. You can come back to the original vamp. And you've got these licks. So really, anything you've got, let's say you've got like a 4 or an 8 bar idea, whether that's the melody or a vamp, you can always just do a stop time, like just hit a chord on a downbeat of what would be your measure 3 or measure 7, do a blues lick, and then do some kind of approach to the last chord, either from a half step above or like maybe from 2 chords below. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. That'll work, right? Let's see. So let's see a different. If you're doing a different vamp. Well, kind of a shout thing, right? Right? So you could go from something that isn't even the melody and just bail out in bar 7. You could do, you know, 4 bars of shout, 2 measures of improvising, and you're out with that trick of just doing a stop time, blues lick, and then approach the chord somehow. Now you could also do a tag, which means to take something and repeat it. So there I just took the last measure of the embellished and repeated it. I guess the last 2 bars. Did it 3 times, this being the 2nd time, 3rd time, and then again, stop time. Here's the bass. On the chord. Now you could also do this again, you know, or whatever, but you could also take a turnaround. And again, this is way more traditional sounding. You could repeat that. And hit a chord, right? So repeating the turnaround 3 times, hit a chord. Or, you know, if you're doing this shout chorus, this vamp, I mean, so let's see. You could go out like that, right? And that could be like a real, like, almost like a fade, right? So you're playing. So making a little riff thing go on at the end, like so. So here you're going up, and then the next time you go down. And you can just repeat that a few times and just kind of get quieter and quieter. And then just repeat the sending one to make the point that you're wrapping things up. You can even slow down at the end, you know, to make it like extra dramatic, right? So there's a few different ways, but basically it all revolves repetition and sort of figuring out where to bail out of the melody. And you know, you could solo out too. You know, you could just you could like, you know, like take this basic vamp like we talked about and turn that into an improvisation vehicle. Again, same idea. You take, so if you're doing into an improvisational thing, then you can land on a little lick and make a little call and response out of it, which you can then signal that you're really finishing by taking one that resolves to the root and just kind of riffing on that for a little bit and reducing it. Less and less of the lick. Again, that's kind of what you hear ensembles do. So just listen to how people get out of their tunes and maybe swipe some of those ideas. Okay, so the updated version of the PDF that's up now should have all the typos corrected from the last couple of weeks as well as this week. And again, thanks so much to both Ricky and Tim for helping out with that. I see a few more comments here, but we're been going on for a while here, so let me just see. This is just some chatting about... there are 3 live streams for each lesson, so there won't be anything next week, partly because it's Thanksgiving, but partly because once we've done the groove and the improvisation and the arranging, the last week you can use just to kind of work on everything and get ready for next month. Let's see. Okay, good. Just some comments about getting down with the theory and the different ideas. Anything else? Okay, cool. Just some conversation about that. So good. This stuff takes time to kind of sink in, but there's lots of resources floating around. And if you're not sure where something is, just post in the forum about it. Someone will know and can point you in the right direction. Okay, well, let me play through the tune one more time using some of these ideas, and then we'll wrap it up. If you're doing Thanksgiving here in the States or maybe in Canada, I know there's a version of it, but I forget how that works. And apologize for my ignorance in advance. But have a good one, and if not, either way, I'll be lurking around the forum with everybody else, and then we'll have our next tune, excuse me, in the following week. Question from Johnny. Excuse me. Somebody asked in the YouTube channel if I was coughing because I had a smoking issue, and no, I'm a terrible excuse for a musician, and I don't smoke, but I live in the allergy capital of the world, apparently, and so just from time to time it gets ugly. So from Edward, this is definitely the final PDF for this month. It should be clean and good to go. And this is the last live stream for the month. And as far as what's up for next month, it's a bit of a surprise, but we're gonna do something for the holiday season by request, and it'll be I'm on the fence about whether we'll take this tune next month through the whole shebang, or whether we'll just do the tune itself and maybe use the month as a bit of a catch up, because it can get pretty fast and furious in December for some folks, and there isn't always as much time as usual to practice. So kind of playing that one by ear at this point, but there will definitely be a new tune and some things to do with it. So let me go out here with a little bit of trouble in mind, and I'll see you around the forum and back in the live stream in a couple of weeks. All right. See you all next time.